Right, what we're going to do today, listen. It's a little bit more lecture-y, I'd say. There's a little bit more lecture-y flavour because of the nature of the content, although I have got a couple of things for you to do midway through, okay? Basically, just to be clear, what we're looking at is 33 up to 39, okay? So this is like the second half of the Germany stuff. That's what we're covering today, all right? Basically, it centres around two questions. These are two questions we need to have quite a strong grip on to be able to tackle any questions effectively, okay? The first one is, how does Hitler turn Germany from a democracy to a dictatorship from 33 to 34? It is worth mentioning here at this point that people often think Hitler becomes a dictator the day he walks in to the Reich Chancellery on the 30th of January 1933. That is not the case. That is not the case, okay? Would you believe it? Ranting and raving for like the last 12 years saying he plans to turn the country into a dictatorship makes everyone think you might try and turn the country into a dictatorship, okay? So therefore, when he is made Chancellor, he is deliberately made a very weak Chancellor by the people around him, okay? They are kind of using him. Their plan is to use him and his MPs in the Reichstag in order to pass through legislation that will fix the economic crisis. And then having fixed the economic crisis, they're thinking that the votes for the Nazis will go down, they get rid of the Nazis, job's good, okay? So they end up in a bit of a chess game with him, and he outplays them, okay? So he moves from coming in as, broadly speaking, a democratic chancellor to 18 months later being a very, very tough dictator, okay? So that's what we've got to try and understand in that stage. What are the steps that he takes, okay, and how does he outmaneuver these other people who are trying to manipulate him, okay? Secondly, how successful are they at creating this thing called a Volksgemeinschaft, okay? I'm hoping that's a phrase that you're familiar with, but you might not be 100% sure on, okay? So later on in the PowerPoint, I'll talk through this thing, this Volksgemeinschaft, okay? Critically, I'm not going through like individually topic by topic. What I'm doing here is I'm looking at themes that crop up throughout the topic, okay? I.e. stuff that we can use in our explanations and our judgments again and again and again and again and again, okay? So if we get a grip on this stuff, it makes it much easier to cover all of the topics, all right? That, out of interest, that is obviously Hitler. The guy next to him is Ferdinand Porsche. Okay, that's the guy that Porsche cars are named after, okay? They're looking at a VW Beetle, okay? Because, like, Ferdinand Porsche designed the VW Beetle, okay? That's the Volksgemeinschaft stuff. What I want you to do, okay, looking at the first section, how does Hitler turn Germany from a democracy into a dictatorship, okay? I want you to look at these 7 groups here. These are 7 groups that pose a threat to Hitler's, like, eternal grasp on power, which is what he's looking for. Down the other side are things that they can do to be a threat to him. What I'd like you to do, you can talk to people around you and have a go at kind of matching them up. If you do that, then extend yourself in 2 ways. 1, work out what does Hitler do from your own memory to try to counter that group as a threat, and then also think about their motivation. Why is that group likely to be a threat to Hitler in the first place? Okay? Give you about 5 minutes. Off you go. Okay, right, let's go through the answers. I'll talk through these individually, okay? 3, 2, 1. Right, so I'll go through each one individually, okay? We'll make sure this PowerPoint is available to you because there's bucket loads of stuff. What matters more is that you understand it rather than you have written down every single little word on these slides. You might write down the words and not actually learn it. It's better that you learn it, okay, and then go and make the notes later on, okay? So, firstly, the SA. Why are the SA a problem for Hitler? Firstly, they can launch a putsch against him. Okay, remember, Hitler actually tries to use the SA unsuccessfully in 23 to try to overthrow the Weimar Republic, okay, in the height of hyperinflation with the Munich Putsch, okay? They're an army, okay? He uses the SS to crush them during the Night of the Long Knives, okay? And by crush them, basically, he decapitates the leadership. He kills off the leaders in a whole range of places and stuff like that to significantly weaken them, okay? Why might they try and turn against him? Well, basically, most of them are members of the socialist faction of the Nazi Party, okay? Remember, the Nazi Party has 2 halves. It has a northern faction that emphasizes the socialist elements of Nazism, and then it has a southern faction that emphasizes more of the nationalist, kind of racist elements of Nazism. Hitler is from that southern faction. Okay, he's not from the northern faction, whereas most of the SA's leaders are from the northern faction. Okay, there's actually a nickname for them. They were nicknamed beefsteaks because what colour's a steak on the outside? Brown. Cut it open, what's on the inside? Red. The point being is they're almost like communists on the inside, okay? So they think that when Hitler comes to power, he's too pro-business, okay? They think he's too pro-capitalism and stuff like that. They want him to go more left-wing in terms of economics, okay? And that's one of the reasons that they begin to get quite frustrated with him and stuff, okay? Their leader, a man called Ernst Röhm, okay? Ernst Röhm also sees himself as effectively Hitler's equal, okay? He doesn't really refer to Hitler as Führer, he refers to Hitler as Adolf. whereas everyone else is like bowing to Hitler almost all the time. Okay, he's not like that. He very much sees himself as Hitler's equal. Okay, so they're a significant threat. Okay, the army. So the army, they can also launch a putsch. Okay, they are deeply unhappy at the size of the SA. Okay, the SA outnumbers them at one point more than 40 to 1. Okay, it is gargantuan. It's because, in particular, the German army has been shrunk so much by Versailles, and the SA has just expanded so largely. But they're really worried about it. Okay, Röhm was also pushing for the SA to become the official army of Germany, just completely get rid of that army. Okay, where they're all wearing these kind of grey outfits, and have it as completely as the SA. Okay, interestingly, this is actually what you see in China today. So in China, China as a country doesn't, strictly speaking, have an army. The Communist Party of China, that runs China, does have an army called the People's Liberation Army, okay? So it's actually an army of a political party rather than an army of a country, okay? That's kind of what the SA are trying to go for, and that really, really panics the generals. In particular, most of the generals are also quite posh people. They're quite aristocratic, okay? And there's a little bit of snootiness going on. The SA is a predominantly working class organisation, and they're like, we don't want to be like, trying to lead this mob of people. We have an elite army of these 100,000 men, okay? Basically, Hitler pleases the army by crushing the SA during the Night of the Long Knives, and then he changes the oath of allegiance that all soldiers must swear to specifically include his own name. Okay, so they have to swear allegiance to Adolf Hitler as well as to Germany as well. Okay, so he manages to get them on side. Okay, they also support him when President von Hindenburg dies, and they support him to become a Führer, which means essentially merging the office of Chancellor and the office of Presidency together. So Hitler gets both those powers. The army could have slightly got in the way of that because, strictly speaking, it's the president who is commander of the army, a bit like in America where Trump is sort of the commander-in-chief of the American military. Okay, it's this kind of similar gig here. All right, so the army don't block it and cause a fuss. They very happily go along with it. Okay. The voters, you can see here, like a collection of various people standing outside a polling station, like for, they're wearing like obviously posters for different politicians, political parties. The voters could theoretically vote him out of power, okay? So what does he do? He bans all political parties except the Nazi Party. Okay, he scraps all of them. The only political party that's allowed to exist legally is the Nazis, okay? And then we've got to bear in mind that a majority of German voters do not support the Nazis. The Nazis are the largest and most popular party, but they only have a plurality. Okay, they only have roughly a third of voters backing them. Okay, maybe slightly more, depends like exactly how fair the votes or elections are in certain places and certain times. But basically, the majority of Germans are not Nazis, or else they'd be voting for them. Okay, so he's got a problem there. The trade unions are able to organise strikes. Okay, in particular, they could organise a general strike. A general strike is where virtually everybody in the country who's in a trade union goes on strike simultaneously. They are incredibly powerful things, general strikes. A general strike brings down the Kapp Putsch in 1920. There's a general strike called in Berlin, and it just completely seizes up Berlin. There's no trains, there's no electricity, there's no telephones or anything like that. Okay, so he needs to get a grip on these people. Basically, he decides to ban trade unions, and he creates a Nazi version, okay, called the Deutsche Arbeitsfront, okay, which means the German Labour Front. That's its logo up there in the background, okay, you can see. It kind of pretends to be a trade union, okay? It kind of sort of just says that it's a trade union when it's not really, or it goes through the motions of being a trade union, okay? But it basically is able to, like, remove all the trade union leaders, okay? Also, a lot of the members of the trade unions are left-leaning, okay? A good way of thinking about it is the left-wing party in the UK at the moment is the Labour Party, which has quite close relations with trade unions today, okay? It's similar things going on here. The SPD and the KPD, okay, the Social Democrats and the Communists, okay, they hate the Nazis, remember, and there's lots and lots of them within the trade unions, okay, so they could be a quite significant danger to them, okay. The Länder, let me explain this one. I know it's written Lander. I didn't have time when I was making this PowerPoint earlier to get the exact symbol in, so there should be 2 dots over the A, okay, therefore it's pronounced Länder, like it's an E instead of an A. Basically, Länder are like counties in Germany. All right, so like we have counties and county councils and stuff like that. The Länder are basically counties. Länder is the plural. Land is the actual county itself. Okay? The thing is, what we need to understand is all of these themselves have their own councils, which are made up of a wide variety of different political parties. So a given part of Germany might be governed by a coalition of different local political parties, or like the local branch of the SPD, the local branch of the KPD, the local branch of the Centre Party, or whoever. Okay? Now, what that means is that if they get like a Nazi policy or Nazi directive or Nazi law coming to them from Berlin, what are they going to do with it? They might just be like, oh yeah, that looks really important. I'll just file that in the bin. Or, oh yeah, we'll get right on this one and put it right at the bottom of the to-do list. Okay, so Hitler has not got control of them, and that means that his ability to enforce Nazi ideas at a local level is quite limited. Okay, basically, in order to deal with them, he essentially scraps them. Okay, he changes things so that any of their meaningful power now goes to the central government in Berlin, which he is head of. Okay, so any of their meaningful power goes there. To administer these areas, though, because they still need a little bit of like just ticking over, making sure small things are being done, what he does is he uses the Nazi Party's own way of carving up Germany into areas. The Nazi Party had been doing this for years. They'd have local branches. Okay, these areas are known as Gau, and each one is led by a Gauleiter. So he gives some of the power to the Gauleiters in these areas. Okay, but like I say, most of the power he draws back in to Berlin. Okay, Joseph Goebbels, the propagandist, okay, Joseph Goebbels was originally Gauleiter for Berlin. He was very effective as Gauleiter for Berlin, and that's why Hitler's like, wow, okay, this guy's propaganda is so good, we should expand it to all of Germany, okay? So he basically puts these guys in charge. This map up here shows how they carve it all up. Germany obviously changes in size as Hitler starts nicking bits of other people's countries. That's why the map's changing in size there, okay? Political parties, okay, I've just alluded to that a minute ago, but basically the parties could take over from Hitler, if you think about it, take over from the Nazis if there are free and fair elections. At the same time, the parties are also collections of people with similar political views that are quite motivated. So they could quite easily organise protests against the regime. Okay, they're like a bunch of people meeting together at weekends and stuff like that. They could very easily put something together and plan stuff. So what does he do? As we said before, he bans political parties. He bans them in July 33, okay? He still holds elections, but the elections are only for Nazis. So you pick which particular Nazi you want to be representing you, okay? That is the result of the Reichstag election of, I think, November 1933. There's no other parties, okay? Brown is the colour of a Nazi party MP, all right? So he just bans all of them, except the Nazi party itself, okay? The communists. So the communists could try and launch like a workers' revolution. Okay, this is exactly what happened with the Spartacists. Remember the Spartacists started to do this at the end of the First World War? He's worried about exactly that sort of thing going on. So what he does is he uses the Reichstag fire in order to begin mass arrest of communists. He convinces von Hindenburg, who can make decrees, the communists are about to take over. Von Hindenburg is convinced. Von Hindenburg is an aristocrat. He doesn't like communists anyway. He's like, okay, fine, let's crush them. So they do this decree. This decree strips all Germans of their human rights, and then they use that to set up concentration camps. The first concentration camps like at Dachau, okay, and later on at places like Sachsenhausen. Okay, that's a photograph of Sachsenhausen there. Okay, those are some prisoners just at the front of Sachsenhausen. Okay, basically you've got to remember the communists are extreme left-wingers. They hate the Nazis. Although a communist government and a Nazi government don't look vastly different, okay, they despise each other. All right, that's why they're a significant threat. So he uses the Reichstag fire decree to crush them, get rid of them, okay, remove them from having any political power. Okay. Right, that's the first bit. That's the first bit, okay? The second bit we need to understand is how successful the Nazis are at creating a Völkergemeinschaft, okay? And this is from basically 34, end of the Night Long Knives, we're talking broadly speaking. So that's sort of June, July 34, and then we're looking exclusively at Völkergemeinschaft from 34 through to 33, from 34 through to 39, there are some policies that are introduced in early 33 and stuff just before the Night of the Long Knives. It's worth bearing those in mind. But this is basically what that second chunk is all about. Okay? Sophia, got a question?
Just to clarify, was all of that when he was Chancellor?
All of the stuff we just talked about a moment ago, was that when he was Chancellor? Yes, he did all of that when he was Chancellor. And it's after the Night of the Long Knives, a few weeks after the Night of the Long Knives, in August, President von Hindenburg dies. And Hitler says, I'm going to merge the powers of the President with the powers of the Chancellor, together call that new job Führer. Okay? So what is the Völkergemeinschaft? Because I appreciate some of you are like, it's distant in your memory or you're not quite sure about it or whatever. Let's go through it in a bit of depth. Okay? It translates slightly clunkily as people's community. Okay? What does that actually mean though, in reality? It means essentially a society where everybody thinks and acts like a Nazi. Okay? He wants to get everybody on the team. Okay? So what kind of things does that look like? Firstly, they're white supremacists. Okay, they completely and absolutely accept white supremacy. Being an Aryan, i.e. being a German as the Nazis define it, is the most important aspect of their identity. Before they are anything else, okay, before there's any other part of their identity coming into who they are, it's being an Aryan. Is that the absolute centre of it? Their primary loyalty is to Hitler. Okay, that's their primary loyalty. To Nazism, to Germany, to Hitler, all those things are kind of bundled together. It is not to their family, it is not to their religion, it is not to their friends, it is to Germany, okay, and Hitler's image of it, okay? That's why you get young people ratting on their parents. If their parents at home were moaning about Hitler, it was not uncommon for young people to go and tell their teacher, and then their parents would have a visit from the Gestapo. Okay? And things go really badly wrong. So this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to get people to think completely about, just being an Aryan and being a Nazi and stuff like that. Okay? They also believe, we'll come to this in a moment, that nothing in your life is private. Nothing in your life is private. Everything is the business of the community. Okay? You don't have a private life. Everything is public. Okay? So, there are 6 important kind of concepts that crop up. Hopefully you recognise some, if not most of them, that crop up that fit into what this Volksgemeinschaft thing is. This is, as you can see, this is quite theoretical and it's quite conceptual, but if you can get your head around it, you're in a great spot to be able to answer those 20 markers and 12 markers, okay, that come up about this, because you just can keep bringing them back again and again and again, virtually every paragraph, back to this. So what are they? I'm going to walk through each one at a time, okay? So one of them is totalitarianism, okay? Totalitarianism is just like kind of what I was saying there. Nothing is private. In a democracy, we generally say you have 2 lives, for want of a better word. You have a public life, okay? Essentially, stuff that happens outside your front door in public, okay? It involves school, it's work, okay? It's essentially when you're in environments with potential strangers. Okay, when you first came to this school, I imagine virtually everybody here was a stranger. Okay, now everyone's obviously clearly your bestie, but until that point, when you came into, first time you arrived, you didn't know anybody, okay? You then have your private life. Your private life is stuff that goes on behind, your front door, okay? Now, the Nazis and totalitarians, communists are the same, don't accept that distinction. They don't accept that you can keep anything private. Their belief is that everything that you do in your life is of interest to the community, okay? Does that make sense? Okay. That kind of stuff is what then leads to the Nazis trying to control every aspect of everyone's lives. The way I kind of think about it is totalitarianism means total control of your life. The government wants total control of all aspects of your life. Okay? Right. Lebensraum, living space, okay? So one of the reasons that Germany loses the First World War is, you can see, Germany has a relatively small coastline when it's not a map that big. Germany itself has a relatively small coastline. It needs to import large amounts of food, okay? But in the First World War, those ports could be very, very easily blockaded by the Royal Navy. And Germany does not have enough farmland to be able to farm enough crops and food to be able to feed its population. There are too many people living in Germany for the land to be able to support them. Okay, that's known as having bad food security. Okay, as a country, as a geopolitical term, it means you've got bad food security. We have terrible food security in the UK at the moment. The basic idea for how Hitler's going to get around this is Hitler decides he's going to conquer a huge land empire, convert that into farmland, and that farmland will mean that Germany can sustain its population without having to rely on imports coming across the sea. Okay, that's the logic. He also believes that people living in Eastern Europe are racially inferior to the Germans. This therefore means they're easy pickings in his mind. Okay, he wants to extend Lebensraum right into the very center of Russia. Okay, that would leave Germany with something like about 4 or 5 separate time zones. Okay, he wants this to be vast. It's looking like on the scale of somewhere like Australia or the United States in terms of just scale. It's going to be huge. Okay. He has this concept, another concept called the Tausend-Jahre Reich, okay, the 1,000-year Reich. What does that mean? Okay, Hitler genuinely expects that he is creating a civilization that will last for 1,000 years, okay? So he compares himself to the Romans, he compares himself to groups like the Assyrians and the Persians, okay? He thinks of himself on that kind of scale. It's huge, absolutely vast. He will construct this vast land empire, and then he's going to do things within this land empire. He's actually pretty far, he's gone pretty far down the line in terms of his planning for it. So you see there, that building is the Reichstag. Behind it, he was going to build the biggest building ever in history. That was going to be a huge dome called the Volkshalle. Okay, the Volkshalle, this is the People's Hall. And it was going to be so large that it could fit the Eiffel Tower inside it. Okay, it was going to be massive. He was going to flatten a big chunk of Berlin. He was going to put a huge road down the middle of it. And he was going to have a section of the SS marching up and down it constantly, 24 hours a day. It was going to be lined with captured Soviet artillery, and it was going to have an Arch of Triumph in the middle of it, so large that the Arc de Triomphe in Paris could fit underneath it. On it was going to be inscribed the name of every German soldier who died in the First and Second World Wars. He was going to create this huge series of provinces, and there were going to be double-decker trains that were so large they would have swimming pools on board to take people between the capitals across the new Reich he was creating. Okay, there were plans for supersonic passenger jets. Okay, really properly vast stuff. Okay? So what you've got to understand is that Hitler is thinking with the year 2200 in mind. He's not thinking about the year 40 in mind, or 41 or 42, he's looking incredibly far down the road with virtually everything that he is doing. Okay? The master race, the Herrenvolk. Hitler believes that to be a German, you must be an Aryan. Okay? To be a German, you must be an Aryan. It is not to do with your values. Okay? It is not to do with your citizenship. Okay? The things that we care about, like in our country. No. What he cares about is purely race. Okay? So therefore, he doesn't think of Germany as a country as we think of a country as a place on a map. That is not how he conceives of Germany. He sees Germany as basically a tribe of people. And it's kind of easier for us to understand what he's doing if we understand that or get our head around that. Germany is a tribe. Okay? He believes that the Aryans, the Germans, are biologically superior to every other race on the planet. Okay? And it's therefore fine for, in his view, to treat other races very, very badly. In the same way that, humans to ourselves, might treat animals in different ways. We don't count a dog as, equal to a human, okay? We'd be very nice to dogs, we're not cruel to them or anything like that, but we, don't consider them to have the same rights as a human or anything like that. That's the distinction he kind of makes between Aryans and non-Aryan people, okay? And it's therefore fine to work them, and it's therefore basically fine to kill them, particularly if they become inconvenient, okay? He then has this idea known as of subhumans called the Untermenschen. Okay, the Untermenschen are basically, it literally translates as under people. You are a member of the Untermenschen if you are a non-Aryan. So all non-Aryans are automatically Untermenschen. They are subhumans in his mind, and they are also Aryans who do not act in an Aryan way. Okay, so it can be a mindset thing. You can, if you're an Aryan, you can develop a non-Aryan mindset, and then you become a member of the Untermenschen. Okay, those are people who might be like social democrats and communists. That can be people who are autistic. That can be people who are disabled. That can be people who are gay or bisexual or trans and stuff like that. Okay, they do not deserve the same rights and the same respect as Aryans. The Nazis believe that all Aryans deserve the same degree of respect. That's why they call themselves National Socialists. That's the socialist element, to some extent, of Nazism coming through. They believe that all Aryans deserve equal treatment. But if you're not an Aryan, okay, you deserve to be treated however the nearest Nazi thinks you deserve to be treated. Okay, it's worth clarifying, disabled here doesn't mean someone who, for example, has been injured in the First World War, had their arms and legs blown off or something like that. It means someone who was disabled from birth, i.e. in the Nazi worldview, there is something wrong with their genetics. They're genetically broken. Okay, this thing here maps out, you may have seen it before, this is the Nuremberg laws. It's a guide to the Nuremberg laws, and it's a guide to how Jewish someone is, and therefore what laws apply to them. Okay, and it's everything from complete Aryan, it says up there, Deutscher Blutiger, okay, German blooder, it kind of means, right the way through to Juda, meaning Jew. Okay, and it's the laws that would apply to you and what you could do in Germany were based on the classification that fitted here. Okay. Lebensunwürdiges Lebens, meaning life unworthy of life. Okay, this is a sub-branch or subcategory of Untermenschen. Okay, what this means is they are people that basically would not survive if it wasn't for the support of other people. Okay, so this thing here, I'm going to give you a sheet with this on in a moment, but so you get an idea of it. It says here, 60,000 Reichsmark is the cost of this disabled person, it's the cost that this disabled person puts upon the Volksgemeinschaft. You can see the word die Volksgemeinschaft there. Okay. Volksgenosse, people, comrade, folk comrade, Aryan, fellow Aryan, this is also your money. Okay? And then it says here at the bottom, this is from it's an advert for a magazine called New People, Neue Volk, and it's the monthly release of the racial politics section, or the monthly magazine of the racial politics section of the NSDAP. That's the official title of the Nazi Party, the NSDAP. Okay? So, how successful the Nazis created this Volksgemeinschaft thing, we basically need to generally bear in mind 4 groups, okay? Workers, Christians, women, and young people. And we need to ask ourselves, how successfully do they get each of these groups to buy into Nazism? We want to go into the exam with an interpretation, our own personal interpretation of how well they do it for each of those groups. Okay? Remember, the last time you want to be making a decision, the worst place to make a decision is in the exam. If you can make the decision before you go in the exam, do it before you go in the exam when you're not stressed, you've got the resources around you, and you've got time. Okay? So you want to go in with your own interpretation of those. If you have your own interpretation, you then compare interpretation 2, which is the one you're going to get and have to talk a lot about, to your own interpretation. You don't want to have to be making up your own interpretation in the exam. Do it beforehand. All right? We also want to know about these particular things here, these topics. There's not as much of a debate on them. It's more about looking at how the Nazis use those things in order to build their Volksgemeinschaft. So a moment ago, for example, I showed you that statue of an Aryan. Okay, that would come under art. okay? Persecuting minorities, those concepts you just talked about there, all right? Propaganda, I've showed you a poster, and the police state, you know, the SS, the role of the concentration camps and stuff like that, okay, to intimidate people. To answer this question, here are 3 things that can be worth bearing in mind, particularly in forming your own interpretation, okay? 1, how many people are actively participating, so doing what the Nazis want, joining Nazi organizations and stuff, okay? Like young people joining the Hitler Youth, for example. Can you get numbers and stats for that? Okay? There was quite a lot of it knocking around, okay, that we can use, but you want to have a command of that. How many people are passively participating? So they're going along with it. That forms generally the bulk of the population in most dictatorships, okay? People who just they want an easy life, so they don't bother getting, you know, causing hassle. So what are we seeing there? And there's a good chunk of that, again, just use it as an example. The Hitler Youth membership absolutely skyrockets midway through the Nazi regime. Why? Because they make it compulsory. Okay? So therefore, on the one hand, you can say, well, a lot of people are getting involved, they're actively participating. And on the other hand, no, they're not really. They're being forced to. Okay? And then you can look at evidence of people actively resisting. Where are people putting their neck on the line? Okay, so we can see in that case things like the Edelweiss Pirates for young people, okay, the swing youth, groups who are forming to oppose the regime. How extensive are those groups? How big are they? Are they everybody? Are they a tiny group of people? We can also look at, do any individuals within those groups have a significant impact overall? So there's a number of people in the German clergy, for example, who start revealing some of the secret things the Nazis are up to, okay, like Action T4, where they were murdering disabled people. Okay, and that stuff they reveal it. So you can get some individuals in there, although they're only one person, they do have quite a large impact. So those are questions to think about as we're going through each one of them, okay, to weigh up. And then my recommendation is when you're revising each of those 4, ask yourself those questions, get evidence for each of those, write the evidence down, then step back and look at, okay, now what's the big picture that I've got? What am I basically seeing? Okay? As I said before, you want to use these, like, you want to form your own interpretations before you go anywhere near an exam paper. Okay? Don't be forming your own interpretation in the exam itself. Okay? What we're going to do, to round this all off, everyone is going to receive a sheet that has an outline of a man on it, an outline of a woman. What I want you to do is around that, plot the features, traits, and characteristics of the ideal Nazi man and the ideal Nazi woman, because those ideas flood right the way throughout Nazism, okay? I'm going to give you a sheet to help you do that. You'll be 1 between 2, okay? It has Nazi posters on it. This is what the Nazis want. This is their ideal. Use that to help you fill in your little sheet that's coming around now, okay? Okay, folks, right, let's just finish up and round it all off. 3, 2, 1. Right, so, key things. What have you got with the bloke? Basically, you're looking for things like strong, tough, in the military or desiring to be in the military. A strong father figure, okay? A member of a range of Nazi organisations, okay? Deeply racist. For the woman, similarly in terms of the views of racism, joining lots of different organisations, a mother figure, wanting to have lots of children, okay? Girls joining the youth wing of the Hitler Youth, the Bundesdeutsche Mädchen, okay? The young boys joining the Hitler Youth itself, okay? These kind of things is what you're looking for. Remember, a lot of it, when we see the ideal Nazi man and ideal Nazi woman, we don't just mean physically what they look like. Hitler's trying to get inside their heads and make them believe things, okay, up there as well, win them over with their ideas, okay? That is the stuff, those are the 2 sessions on Nazi Germany, okay? Well done for coming along to them, because we do appreciate easy lunchtime you're giving up. This will all bear fruit in the long run, okay? It really will. If you've got any questions and stuff like that, because we haven't been able to do like too much of a Q&A kind of jobby, can you please use that QR code? This is going to be also on the PowerPoint that we'll send this round and circulate it with you so you can get it there. Okay, we are going to do, me and Ms. Bennell are going to do like a revision podcasty sort of thing. We've brought some mics, haven't we? Got some, yeah, exciting mics for it. And then we'll do in a few weeks, we'll do that and release it, okay? So if you've got any questions, you can bang them on there. Thank you very much for coming. Bye-bye, see you later.